Welcome to the Daily Review. This is Razak, Senior Trading Strategist here at CMTrading. And today is April 24, 2023, and today is Monday morning. So looking at the highlights of the day, we're watching the U.S. markets retracing before we get into quarterly earning reports for some of the major tech stocks, including Microsoft and the FANG stocks later this week. No major economic events scheduled for today. So as we look at the various markets, starting out with the Forex symbols, the Canadian dollar stops at resistance and retraces just a bit. And looking at the U.S. markets, both the indices, the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ, both trickling lower before these numbers. Looking at commodities, gold breaking that $2,000 support to $19.80 and oil filling in the gap to $76 a barrel. Now looking at the stocks, tech stocks are trickling lower. And lastly, looking at cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin falling to $27,000. So let's take a look at the markets and see what we can expect from today's trading. So we're going to start out with the Canadian dollar. As you can see, it is hitting that supportish level. But the question is it going to break above it? So it's at 135.60. And this is really important because the Canadian dollar is very much linked to oil. Now, as oil is getting lower, so does the Canadian dollar get weaker. And it means that the Canadian dollar is going to go to 139, 140-ish level, perhaps. Okay, so keep that in mind. As the Canadian dollar is weakening here from 135.60-ish levels. So this is really a very important moment for the Canadian dollar. So I keep an eye on it if I were you. Okay, especially for today. Now looking at the commodities, gold, we're tracing down to 1978 right now. Okay, breaking that supportish level of 1996, 2000-ish level. But yet, remember this, we're still consolidating in the upper range. I mean, we're only about 70 points away, or really almost 90 points, 70 to 90 points away from our all-time high. So I can't say that this is going to break down or it's going to get weak. It is what it is for right now. It's consolidating. It's at the bottom of the range. So keep that in moment. Okay, keep that as a factor. Now looking at crude oil, filling in that gap to $76 a barrel. Okay, we did fill that gap. And as we fill that gap, this is the point it's supposed to bounce off of it. So that's what I'd be looking for next if it does bounce off of it around this area. Now looking at the U.S. markets trickling lower, we could see the Dow Jones hitting from 34,100-ish level down to 33,798. And going into this week, it's really important because there's not going to be like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Remember, much of the FANG stocks place, Microsoft, are heavily invested in AI. And that's not the value today, but the value in 2 to 3 years from now. So keep that in mind as that is still unfolding. Now looking at the NASDAQ, it's trickling, but not as much. So this may be a factor going into today's session. So looking at Apple going into this week, it's just mildly lower. Looking at Facebook, about $8 low from its 220 high-ish level. That's really important. Microsoft also a little bit lower, but nothing really to write home about. So there's nothing really outstanding here going into this week. However, Cisco, this is really important. Cisco broke down last week. We covered it. It's bouncing off support, but, okay, this is a major, major fall. So keep that in mind going into this week. Intel also breaking a 30-day moving average. Also quite significant going into today's session. Now, as we get this information out, when we look at more the brick and mortar kind of stocks like Alcoa is trading lower to its bottom range. Okay, they're not going to give it to you right away. It's going to start out with these type of stocks, the Alcoas, the Ciscos, the Intels, the really hard manufacturing kind of old school kind of businesses. It's going to fall apart. Okay, so keep that in mind. And if this does drag down the market, it can. Okay, it has that strength, because the market is driven by hardware at a certain point, okay? Although, the other argument is that AI is going to be the future of the world. So all these FANG stocks and Microsoft are so heavily invested in it that it's going to create future opportunities. That's true, but to a certain extent, okay? So just keep that in mind as we're going into today's session. Now, lastly, going into Bitcoin, let's look at a 4-hour chart. We're breaking to 27,500-ish level. That's a major retracement. Now, we're still at the bottom of the range because that's why I had the weekly chart. If we look at the weekly chart, we haven't really broken it, okay? That is still the bottom of that range. Now, if we do break 27,000 to 26, then it gets a little bit iffy, and then we can get closer to 25. And once you're at 25 and you break that, then you could continue going further down. So keep that in mind as we go into today's session with these symbols. Now, the rest of the week is going to be quite active, so just be prepared for it. This is Fed Razak. I wish you guys a great trading day. Thank you.